Hi, my name is Martin Purnell, and welcome to Off-Grid Christianity, a weekly podcast for those who go or don't go to church and where we can meet and hear from those that have made their faith count. This podcast series is to encourage via conversation. You can contact us as well by email, ogc@accessradio.biz. Biz is spelled B-I-Z. So please enjoy today's guest. Who is she? Well, she wrote a book in 2020 entitled Tasting Dirt, When You're Disappointed with God. Why did she write this book with such an honest title? Was she tired of people throwing Bible verses at her to help her in her whatever pain she was in? How cathartic was it for our guest to describe in the book about her miscarriage? Was she disappointed with God or angry? Our guest is based at Grace River Christian Counseling Center in Oklahoma. Where do we come from? Sorry, I have to say that. Do apologize, sir. But every time I hear Oklahoma, I was brought up on that musical, so
it pops up frequently here too.
I bet it does. Anyway, their mission statement is simple: to provide counselling interventions that are distinctively Christian and clinically excellent. Our guest also authors the blog emotionculture.com, so I'd be surprised if today's guest doesn't have much to say. So, official welcome now, that's Sara Hall. Sara, thank you so much for joining us today. Well, I've already sort of given the game away that you're in Oklahoma.
Right.
Whereabouts are you based in Oklahoma, please?
So I'm based in Norman, Oklahoma. It's about smack dab in the middle, just a little south of Oklahoma City.
Is it famous for anything?
If you're into American football, there is a college here and a college team, and that seems to be what people recognize Norman for most. We're also the National Weather Service is based here.
Oh.
So anytime there's a tornado alert or, other kind of, national weather emergency, our emergency services automated message here in the United States says the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma, da-da-da-da-da. So seems to be those two things.
For me, anyway, whenever you hear the word American football and yet you hardly kick it, it's just one of those things, isn't it?
It is one of those things. My son is actually playing, this is his 8th grade year of school, and he's actually playing American football for the first time this year. And so I've been learning a lot more than I ever wanted to know about football this year.
Moving very swiftly on before this becomes sporty orientated and people switch off in their droves. Let's go for the 5 important or not so important questions, please, Sara, so we can get a better understanding of who you are maybe through them. Question 1, if you could invite anybody from history for an evening meal, alive or dead, so that you could ask them questions, who would it be?
I had to put a lot of thought into these questions beforehand because that's just part of who I am.
Yeah.
I would love to say C.S. Lewis, but I'm really afraid that I'm not smart enough to keep up a conversation with him for that one.
I don't know.
The other person, I think I've always loved Oscar Wilde's writings. My son Dorian is actually named after the picture of Dorian Gray, although not after the character because the character is a little evil.
Yeah, a bit flawed, I would say.
Yes, a bit flawed. So I would love to have more conversation with him just about his own life journey around faith and leaving the faith and then returning to the faith and switching. I believe he grew up Catholic and then became Protestant towards the later half of his life, or perhaps it's the other way around. I can't remember.
It's one or the other.
But anyway, I would love to spend some time to be able to ask him some questions.
That is a great answer. I can't remember the last time someone chose Oscar Wilde. We've had C.S. Lewis quite regularly, especially from our American cousins.
Oh, yeah.
So the fact you call your son Dorian, how involved is he now with the readings of Oscar Wilde, and what does he think of Oscar?
He has yet to read. I've read him some selections from some of the poem bits from one of the plays. He hasn't yet read The Picture of Dorian Gray, although I've explained to him before the concept. What I love about the book so much is just this idea that, what if there were no consequences for our actions? That seems like something that we would all want very much. I wish I could just do whatever I wanted, get whatever I needed, and not have to deal with any kinds of consequences. That seems like it would be real freedom. But in the end, it was not freedom at all. And real freedom is found in the care and compassion and the ethic that we hold ourselves to in how we treat ourselves and how we treat other people. And we find that through our relationship with Jesus and how he shows us to treat other people and how he taught us to treat other people. Then I think that the real, true freedom is in that. But so I love this idea that the character of Dorian Gray, he had this opportunity, right? That most of us would say, oh, I wish I could have that opportunity to do whatever he wanted and not have any consequences. But ultimately that was his undoing, right? It wasn't freedom. It was exactly the opposite. He was bound. He was imprisoned to this painting that held the visible evidence of all of his sins against himself and against other people. And he couldn't bear that. I first read it when I was about 15, I think, and have reread it over and over and over again since then. I just keep falling in love with it every time I read it. And just the honesty around what a person would do if they had that opportunity, right? And how that really might play out. And I appreciate Oscar Wilde's willingness to explore that in such a captivating story.
Changed it slightly. Monty Python do a great sketch.
Yeah.
Which takes place in the home of Oscar Wilde. One of the punchlines is, well, it's one of Wilde's. He comes out with these great expressions. So it'd be interesting to see how he gets on with his good self over a meal.
Yes.
And just how naturally funny he is. What would you cook him, by the way?
Oh, that's a great question. I don't know anything about what he liked or didn't like in the way of food.
A few of our previous guests chicken out by saying, no pun intended, by saying, I'll take him down to our local fish and chip shop or something like that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You could do that.
I could take him to our a local barbecue place. That's kind of maybe our American equivalent.
You could indeed. I think he liked French food. Didn't he die in France in the end? Or was certainly
think
buried over there,
so.
isn't he? Well, there you go. You could give him a frog's leg or something like that. Question 2. Who is your favourite biblical character or favourite biblical story or favourite parable, please, Sarah?
I think that would have to be Mary of Bethany. That's Lazarus' sister, Mary. And in my book, I walk through her story and piece together because it comes in chunks through the Gospels, right? And it's not just, from start to finish. You don't get all the information about her and her relationship with Jesus in one place. And I found a lot of comfort in studying her and her relationship with Jesus, and especially her experience of being disappointed with Jesus. Like she and her sister Martha, they sent for Jesus to come and heal Lazarus, and Jesus didn't show up, like on purpose. And then when Jesus did come and Lazarus was already dead and buried, we get this beautiful scene where, Martha goes out to meet him first, right? And she says, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died. And they have this whole theological conversation about the resurrection and about life and about death, right? And then Mary goes out to meet him. And the Bible doesn't say that Martha went. It says that Martha goes back to Mary and says the teacher is asking for you, but it doesn't say that Jesus asked for Mary. And I totally chalk that up to older sister being like, I know that you need this, so you should go talk to him. And Mary, she runs out and collapses in the dirt at Jesus's feet. And I just imagine, and it's like she's sobbing, she weeps like at his feet. And she says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And there's such a contrast for me between the place that Martha is in and the place that Mary is in, right? Where Martha has some more rational, logical, theological, needs to be met there. And Mary has a very deep, raw, emotional needs, where she's expressing her disappointment with Jesus in that moment and his response to her, right? He weeps with her. That's that Bible trivia. What's the shortest verse in the Bible? Jesus wept. And that's the context for it, right? He weeps with her. And it's not just one single movie, cinema perfect tear rolling down his cheek. He weeps. He ugly cries with her. He makes sounds, when you're crying so hard, you're out of control of the sounds that are coming out of your body. He wept with her. He didn't tell her to dry her face. He didn't tell her to get up, get over it. He didn't say any of those cliche things that we're so fond of saying to each other, well, just fully rely on God, you've got to have faith. He didn't tell her that the end would justify the means. He didn't tell her that, oh, no, it'll be all right. You just wait, just wait to see what I'm going to do next. That's going to make it all worth it. No, he entered into that moment with her, and he allowed her pain to move him emotionally to compassion and to empathy. And he joined her in that moment of grief. And, he didn't deny it. He didn't say, how dare you accuse me? You can't possibly understand, what God is doing in this moment. Right. But he was just with her where she was at in that moment. And that's what she needed. And I feel such a deep connection to her character and to that experience. And subsequently, I feel such a deep connection to Jesus and his willingness to come and join us in our pain without trying to take it away from us or make us be okay because it makes him uncomfortable. The things that we humans often do with each other when we show up with a lot of pain for each other. So yeah, that's my favorite.
It's a fascinating answer. Because it's audio only, I got the impression there was a lot of emotion when you were sharing what Mary actually said. If you had been here.
Yeah, whenever I read it, and I'm willing to admit that's me kind of superimposing my own experience and my own emotions into the text, because there's no tone of voice, right, in the text. But from what it says about, that she collapsed in the dirt at his feet, that she's weeping, I can't imagine the words not coming out with some layer of deep emotion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Great answer. Thank you. This is going to be some podcast. Question 3. Now, you can either be Prime Minister of the UK, or if you want to go for an easier job, you could be President USA. Which one are you going to go for first? Let's say you're going to be the first lady president of the USA.
For the sake of my own mental health, I really avoid politics and try to keep my head in the sand as much as possible. But I think that I would institute a new holiday. I really love Ireland's Women's Christmas on the 6th of January. I was doing some genealogy research on my own, like Irish ancestry, as part of a course a year ago. I was just learning more about Ireland and came across that practice. And I was like, I love this. I only know what I have read about it. I don't know, how much that reflects how widespread it might be.
This is news to me.
Okay.
I'm very ignorant, obviously. And the border with the Republic of Ireland, as a crow flies, is about 30 miles away. So tell me more.
What I've learned about it is that on January the 6th, it's a day to celebrate all of the effort and intentionality that women bring into creating the atmosphere of the holidays and celebrating the holidays. And so on that day, it's my understanding, just based on my reading, honestly, that men and children will put up all the Christmas decorations and kind of reset the house. And then women will often gather together and maybe go out for a meal, enjoy some time together, and not have to worry about kind of cleaning up after all the effort that they put into putting on the holidays. So I'm really curious about that.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about how, beyond just what I've read about it, how, like I said, widespread it might be in the Republic of Ireland, and how is actually celebrated or not celebrated or reflected.
Yeah.
But I would love to bring something like that to the United States.
Do you know what? Sounds a great idea. Maybe just embolden it. I was going to say embroider. That's the wrong word. Embroider it a bit. Yeah, let's go for it. Let's create a new terminology. Embroider it a bit by saying, well, we'll make it a family day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not a family, then obviously you can build on to Be Nice Day.
Right.
Yes.
Spread it out, make it a bit more inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe you could celebrate more sport together as well as a family.
Maybe.
Question 4, outside of family events. What has been your most enjoyable day out so far, please, Sarah?
My husband and I took a trip together, the two of us, to Glacier National Park. It's in the state of Montana. And then there's a bit of it that's also over the border into Canada as well. We hiked out to a waterfall, and that is just one of the most beautiful natural settings I think I've ever been in my entire life. And we did see a large brown bear. And my husband likes to joke that I took him to the woods and I tried to feed him to a bear for our anniversary. I was distinctly trying to make sure that none of us got eaten by the bear. I love to spend time outside. I love very tall trees. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Part of me is kind of a hippie, I guess. I love very tall, established trees and woods and forests, and I love being outside in nature. I also love to ride horses whenever I get the chance. And so anytime that I'm able to go and do that, I don't have any of my own right now, but anytime I get to go and do that, that's always a good day for me too.
Question 5, what has been your most embarrassing moment, please, Sarah?
I have a lot of embarrassing moments. What is in my head doesn't always translate clearly out of my mouth.
Oh, welcome to the club.
But then I'm also quite a literal thinker.
Uh-huh.
People often get me with their sarcasm. It seems to be especially elder men enjoy the opportunity to they'll say something kind of ridiculous and I'll take it quite literally, and then they get a good laugh out of it.
Yes.
Because they're like, you thought I was serious, and I'm like, oh yep, again, you're welcome. Glad to provide you with that laugh. I have a lot of embarrassing moments around that. But then on a more serious note, talking about, this comes up in my book. I share this about myself, that when my parents discovered the sexual abuse that I had gone through when I was 13, because my abuser was another woman, my parents couldn't quite get past the homosexual aspect of that to see the abuse. I had never felt more ashamed in my entire life than that, just the response of condemnation for this homosexual relationship that was in fact an abusive relationship. But my parents couldn't quite get around that for a number of years. And then when they shared that information with some of the people at our church, and just the church's response to me in that aspect, I think maybe that's beyond embarrassment and into like shame, like I said. But I think that's probably the most embarrassing experience for me. Yeah.
Can we wrap up our sleeves and go for it in more detail, if you don't mind?
Yeah, go for it.
Because I said to you earlier, I don't know where this is going to go. If it goes off-piste, we'll go for off-piste.
Right.
That line you just said there about and what the church did,
mm-hmm.
and this could be maybe one of the factors as to why you decided to go down the line of becoming a therapist.
Yes, it is.
Tell me more than what the church did, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I was 13 at the time, and so I was involved in the youth group, right, at the time. I was not aware of who knew or didn't know specifically, because I wasn't privy to, all the conversations that my mom had had. But it seemed to me that kind of overnight that no one from the youth group, none of the other, teenagers wanted to interact with me. Even my best friend, they didn't want to talk to me, didn't want to sit near me, didn't want to have anything to do with me. My youth group leader at the time, who was a really important person in my life, and to that point had been such an example to me of love and of compassion, her response was to have this whole very one-sided conversation with me, where she talked at me for quite a long time about how all of us have sin in our lives, and how once we recognize the sin in our lives, it's our job to leave that behind and to move on and to move forward and to essentially just stop it and then move on into the life that God wanted us to live. And she said all these things, and she didn't ever say anything specific about homosexuality or same-sex attraction or, anything like that. There was just all this conversation around sin and leaving it behind. Other adults in the church, they would avoid me. I would see them looking at me and talking to each other. And again, as an adult looking back, I'm like, I have no idea what anybody actually knew or did not know. I have no idea if these things were directed towards me or not. But at the time, I couldn't help but perceive that. And so I saw that they would look at me, and then they would have this look on their face of disgust, like they had just smelled something rotten. And then I wasn't allowed to participate in youth group things, overnight things, or traveling things, or
what?
But again, nobody said anything quite very direct to me. Nobody said anything specific about, homosexuality or same-sex attraction, but all these things changed. And it was like I had suddenly lost the one place that I had felt safe, and the people that I had thought were my people and that I thought that I had belonged to, and was left very confused about that. And I felt so much self-hatred. And I was convinced, because I had heard, teachings at various churches growing up, had kind of a different, I almost said strange or weird, but I think I'd rather call it different.
Yeah.
Growing up, when it comes to growing up in the church, I don't know if it's the same in the United Kingdom, in Europe. I don't know if it's similar in this aspect as it is here in the United States, but for the most part, if a person grows up in church, they grow up in one, maybe two churches. And I went to a lot of churches because my parents didn't go regularly, but I always wanted to be in church for some reason. Like that was always on my heart. I always wanted to be in church. I wanted to go, anytime there was any kind of service or anything happening, I wanted to be there. And I would go with whoever would invite me and whoever would give me a ride, or to whatever church had a bus ministry that would come and pick me up and bring me home. And so I went to a lot of different churches and a lot of different denominations. So I have a broad experience of the different traditions and beliefs and, doctrines and whatnot that I didn't think at the time was different, but now I realize as an adult and having talked to other people and being like, oh, that's different. Not very many people have been to Baptist churches and Methodist churches and Catholic churches and Lutheran churches and non-denominational churches and all these different churches, right? They've only been to one, maybe two. So I had heard teachings, lots of different teachings prior to this particular church. And I think this church is the church that I went to for the longest amount of time, my whole childhood, for a couple of years. And I'd heard teachings about homosexuality, that it's an abomination, that it's a sin, that it's et cetera, right? And so as part of experiencing this abusive relationship, I held a lot of self-hatred and a lot of self-disgust. And I believed that God must be disgusted with me and that he must be done with me because of this. I think some of what I perceived from other people was really them and their own disgust and their own misunderstanding and their own, whatever that is. And some of it was mine from inside of my heart that I then put on them because I couldn't conceive of anything different at the time. Yeah.
Right. I think you said you were 13 at the time.
Yeah, 13. Yeah.
And thank you for being so open. Just so we get into a time frame, because obviously by you telling me the following answer, we'll know roughly how old you are now. What year did this happen?
That would have been 2003.
Really? Because I would have thought from about 2000 onwards, the mind shift was changing somewhat in churches, but obviously not.
I think it was just barely beginning at that point in time. But really, depending on what denomination and where you are in the United States, the mindset has not shifted a whole lot.
What interested me, reading obviously the little biogs I could find of you online, and obviously now this is spurred you on as a therapist, was that you said you felt you had something to help out with the LGBTQ plus.
Yeah.
Now I can understand why.
Yeah. I really resonate with that community. I understand how that feels to be devalued and to be made to feel ashamed and like you're something disgusting and you don't belong, or that God doesn't want you, doesn't love you. I understand how much that hurts. And so I have a lot of compassion for the community, and that as I have grown in my own faith and my relationship with Jesus and come to understand that that is not at all how he feels, towards me or towards anyone. I cherish every opportunity that I get to be an experience of love and gentleness for others from Jesus to them.
You see, I'd like loads of people now to go online and order your book, because I know it's available on Amazon. Maybe you have to do a reprint, who knows? So I don't want to give too much away, because obviously I think it'd be more important for people to read it as well. But looking at the situation of you being a therapist, you obviously have to see both sides of the coin now, I suppose, in some ways.
Yeah.
And the fact that you still have your faith, going back to that time as a 13, 14-year-old, it would be so easy, so natural to say, well, I've done nothing wrong here, and blow you, God, clear off. Mm-hmm. So what made you keep your faith? And how has that been, I was going to say embroidered again, because that's a good word.
It is a good word.
How's that been embroidered? There we go. We'll start a trend now. How's that been embroidered?
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I never questioned whether or not God existed. I questioned whether or not he could love me. Like I said, I held a lot of self-hatred and self-loathing, and I blamed myself. As I grew, matured, and was able to have these experiences of receiving his love, and met other people who were experiences of, his love, right? Regardless, and did not respond to me sharing that I had that experience of abuse or even ongoing same-sex attraction, that did not respond with disgust or, hatred or, fear or any of those things. And the healing that came for me in that, and realizing that I had misunderstood, right? I had gotten it wrong about God and about how he thought and how he felt, towards me. And so had other people in my life. And namely, the people, my parents and church leaders and that youth leader, they had gotten it wrong. And it took me a long time to get here, but I'm at a place where I have a lot more compassion for that. And like you said, as a therapist, I kind of have to be on both sides. So I do a lot of work with teenagers and college age, people who have grown up in conservative Christian homes and churches and are now wrestling with an LGBTQ plus identity and their families. I have had quite a few parents who bring their teenagers in for counseling, and they want specifically pastoral counseling. So prior to going back to school to become a marriage and family therapist, I practiced as a pastoral counselor, and they wanted specifically, Christian counseling or biblical counseling. They wanted pastoral counseling. They wanted someone to fix their child. And so in having those conversations with the parents, and that was a lot of work for me personally, I'll be honest, to come to a place where I could seek to understand, okay, I have some understanding of what the child, the teenager is experiencing, right? And I'm careful with that too, right? Because my experience is not the same as another person's experience, even when they're similar, right? But also to become curious about what is it that these parents are experiencing, and to sit with them and to enter into that with them, and to come to this place where I can hear from the parents that they have all this pressure to be responsible for their child's eternity. And again, I don't know if that's kind of more of an American Christian church thing, or if that's similar in the UK and in Europe, but like we really put a lot of weight on parents to be responsible, like for their child's salvation, for their child's eternity. And I think it's more pressure than was ever intended to be there. And so we have the parents that have grown up hearing the same kind of messages about God thinks this, and God says this, and God feels this way about the LGBTQ community. And then they hear from their spiritual leaders, from their pastors and from their, Sunday school teachers and whatnot, right? Like, you've got to do something, like you've got to save your child, right? You can't let them go to hell, right? And there's all this pressure. And so they carry all this fear and all this pressure around, like, I've done something wrong, and that's why my child is experiencing these things or identifying this way. And now I have to fix it, or my failure will result in my child going to hell for eternity. And so when you look at that through the parents' eyes, they're like, whoa, that's scary. That's heavy, right? And so no wonder they're responding in these very extreme ways, right? And then to be able to meet them in that place and have those conversations around, like, yeah, this is really scary for you. And I've had parents who told me before, they're like, we were prepared. We knew that at some point, that nobody's perfect, and that some of our children might struggle with drugs or alcohol. Some of them might struggle with premarital sex. One of them might, have a baby out of wedlock. Like, we were prepared for all of that. We were never prepared for a gay kid or a trans kid. And so just having those conversations, with the parents and being like, okay, well, let's sit with that, and let's come back to, if we could step outside of the fear for a minute and think about the relationship that you want to have with your child, and the relationship that you want your child to be able to have with Jesus, and what responses, what actions, what attitudes, what is going to put barriers between you and your child, and between your child and Jesus, and what attitudes and actions, what words, what responses are going to remove barriers. And so we focus on that. And so, like you said, kind of like having to be on both sides, of the fence and see both sides of the picture. And that's really what drove me to go back to school and to pursue my license, is this sense of, like, I had training and I had practice to work with individuals, to work with one at a time, but I need to be able to bring these, I keep calling them children in their parents' eyes. They are, but they hate to be called children. No teenager wants to be called a child. No college student, wants to be called a child, right? But to bring these families together, the parents and the kids, no matter what age they are, and to be able to facilitate the conversations and the interactions that would heal instead of dividing. Like, I needed to know how to do that. And so that's why I pursued specifically marriage and family, therapy, as opposed to licensed professional counseling or any of the other mental health, type of tracks that are available here in the United States. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking for a long time. Did that answer your question well?
It did, and it spurs on many more, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Because I think one of the biggest concerns I had, in a positive way, for you to then expand, if that's okay, is when you said the parents come in, they want you to fix that child. And it could be that they are thinking that because they go to denomination A, where everything is dogmatic and thou shalt not and thou shalt not and thou shalt not, they come to see you, you'll fix them so that the child will also realise that thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not is correct. And so your position is, well, actually, that's not correct. So how do you deal with that, assuming that you've had that situation? I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you do?
How I deal with that, first I had to deal with that internally, right? Because like many of the churches that I went to when I was growing up, I was talking earlier about how we put all this pressure, and by we, I mean the church with a capital C. I'm overgeneralizing, right? About like the American Christian church puts a lot of pressure on parents to be responsible for their kids' salvation.
Mm-hmm.
We also put a lot of pressure on each other to be responsible for the salvation of every person we come in contact with.
Yes.
And that's really too much.
Yeah.
And that's not like in my study of the Bible, that's not what I see, right? Like I am not ultimately responsible for anyone's eternity. That's beyond my power to do anything about. I can have relationships and I can answer questions and I can share my own story and I can, I can be the best possible experience of Jesus's love that I can be for people, right? But I cannot make anyone be in relationship with him. And so bringing that into my role as a therapist, and that like it's not my job to make anyone believe any certain way, one way or the other. But I see my role, especially as a pastoral counselor, to help people let me bring it back to my mind. This is what I say. This is kind of my mission statement, so to speak. I exist to help people overcome the emotional barriers that prevent them from having their best possible relationships with God and with other people. And so I help them focus on what is it that's putting a barrier between me and God? What is it that's putting a barrier between me and my family member, between me and my spouse, between me and my child? And how do I remove those barriers and then improve those relationships? Because I believe that like once a person is to the place where they can have a conversation with God and that's no longer stinted by shame or fear or anger or disappointment or anything like that, then I believe that God will show up for them the way that he does, the way that he has for me, and that he'll speak to them what they need. And he knows what they need, and I don't always know what they need.
What?
Yeah, what?
How did God turn up for you then in that moment where you realised that the parents were against you, everybody was against you, the American football team was against you and they didn't even know you?
Yeah.
The whole world and his dog, even the dog was against you. Or that's how it felt.
Everyone, that is how it felt. That is 100% how it felt.
How did God turn up?
So prior to my parents finding out, in the midst of that abusive relationship, I had reached a point where I was convinced that there was no hope for anything. Nothing was going to get better. In the relationship, I could not conceive of it as abuse. Like I couldn't, see that's what was happening, which is often the case inside of abusive relationships. And so I did actually reach a point where I attempted suicide. God protected my life, and I spent 10 days, I think, in the inpatient psychiatric ward here in the United States. And I still didn't tell anybody about what was going on. And surprised, nobody ever asked. Nobody was like, why'd you do this? Why don't you want to live? What's going on? Nobody ever asked me that.
Really?
Yeah. Everybody told me, the doctors and my parents and the therapists, and they told me, well, here's what's going on with you.
What?
Yeah. And you need this medicine and you need to be on a better sleep schedule and you need to start volunteering. But nobody ever asked me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So I came out of that situation and I was in the van on the drive home and I was already mentally planning my next suicide attempt. Because in my mind, I was like, this is not getting any better.
Yeah.
And I can't tell anybody because of the shame, right? I can't ask for help. I can't. So I'm going home and I'm going right back into that abusive relationship. And it's going to be 10 times worse than it was because now she's going to be angry because I tried to quote unquote leave her. And so I was already planning my next suicide attempt. And I remember technically this counts as a prayer. It was not a very penitent prayer. It was more of me kind of trying to throw it in God's face at the moment. I think I remember thinking to him, if you have any reason for me to be here, you'd better give it to me quick. Because the first chance I get, I'm out of here.
Wow.
So I get back home and find out that the next night there is a concert happening in the gymnasium at a local church. And it was a punk rock concert. We had a great local music scene when I was a teenager in middle of nowhere, Illinois, here in the United States. So in order to appear normal to my parents and healthy and like, oh, everything's fine. I want to go to the concert. I want to go, be with my friends, et cetera, et cetera. I asked if I could go and they said that I could go. And so I went. I was taking a break from the mosh pit at the time, and a friend ran past me and she had this yellow baseball cap, and this guy was chasing her. And then a couple minutes later, she ran back past the other direction and the guy's still chasing her. And I could tell he was getting pretty fed up, and she thought she was flirting, but it was not going over well. And she comes back by a third time and she shoves the hat at me. She's like, run. I'm like, no. So I just gave the hat back to him, and we started talking.
What was written on the hat?
It was just a yellow baseball cap. Nothing specific written on the hat, I don't think. I think we still have that cap, though, because, spoiler alert, right? That eventually became my husband.
Oh!
Yeah. So that's how I met my husband. Although at the time,
wow.
Yeah, we were 13 and 14. He had not grown up in church. His family were not practicing Christians. He had just recently come to know Jesus. The way that he talked about Jesus, the way that he talked about the Bible, the way that he interacted with other people, it was so different. For all the churches I had been in and all the Christians that I had met, he was different. Like when people talk about like, it's a relationship, about faith, right? Like he's the first person I met that I really thought like, he really acts like this is a relationship, that he likes Jesus and Jesus likes him. They get on all right, like the two of them. There was so much darkness in my life, and he had so much joy and so much light. And I just wanted to be around that. Like I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame.
And all because he threw a cap at you to hold on to.
Well, because some other girl who had stolen his cap threw his cap at me. But nevertheless, yes. And so we just hung out and we started talking, and then we started hanging out some more after that. We started going to church together, and then fast forward several months, my parents find out about the abusive relationship, and they kind of freak out about the homosexual nature of it and everything. And I think it was the very next day, and I was back to contemplating, oh yeah, that's the point. That after having, met Stephen at that concert, I didn't attempt suicide again after that, even though I had been planning on it. And so that was February. And then fast forward to June, the end of June, my parents find out. And again, I'm back in that place where I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is not, I don't want to be here. I don't want to deal with this. Like, this is not, and starting to have those suicidal thoughts again. And then the next day he invited me over to a family barbecue at his family's house. And I think my parents were just pleased that I wanted to hang out with a guy. And so they let me go. And he asked me to be his girlfriend that night. And because I was in a great, emotionally healthy place to start a new relationship, I said yes.
But only holding hands.
Only holding hands, yes. But then a little bit, into that relationship, and the guilt is weighing on me, right? Because I'm thinking he doesn't know that I'm not a virgin. He doesn't know that I had a gay relationship. He doesn't know that I had a girlfriend. He doesn't know, like any of these things. And if he knew, then he would hate me and he would never want anything to do with me. And it got to the point where I felt like, okay, I have to tell him we can't go any further in this relationship. It's not fair to him, right? Like I have to tell him and let him make his decision, right? Mm-hmm. And so I told him, and in that moment, I remember that conversation so vividly. And what I remember about it most is looking at my own pants legs, because I couldn't make myself look him in the eyes. And I decided that I was just going to tell him, just the facts, and let him just make of it whatever he was going to make of it, and do with it whatever he was going to do with it. And there was silence. And then I couldn't bear the silence anymore. And I made myself look at his face. He was crying. And he said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. That was not okay." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Sarah, that was abuse." And that was the first time anybody had spoken that to me. Like he saw for what it was. And that was so healing for me. And in that moment, that was a different experience for me. And I believe too that was a different experience of who Jesus is to me. Like not the disgusted faces, like they just smelled sour milk or something, right? And not the sin and you have to leave your sin behind, and not to weirded out to even say the words, like homosexual or same-sex attraction or gay or, any of those things, right? Like not, any of that, and not the yelling and the being grounded and the being, et cetera, right? But just the seeing that I was in pain, so much pain, and the compassion for that pain.
Yes.
And so that experience was really transformational for me and transformed. That was the beginning of it. Didn't all happen all at once, but the beginning of transforming my relationship with God. And then I always feel the need to add this kind of caveat when I share my story, because I recognize that not all homosexual relationships are abusive, right? And the fact that it was a homosexual relationship is not what made it abusive. It was that she was an adult and I was 13. That's what made it abusive, right? I'm careful when I share my story, because I have had Christians kind of take my story and take it to mean like, oh yes, that's what's wrong. And they'll run with that and be like, yeah, that's what's wrong. Like with gay relationships and homosexual relationships. And like, that's why they're bad. And that's why God is against them. And I'm like, whoa, no, hold up. Because that's not the point, right? But the point is that for us to be able to see through our own biases, to see people's pain and meet them there, instead of being caught up in our own fears or our own weirdness or our own, sense of confusion or disgust or, whatever it is. Anyway, that's the point.
But also, and tell me what you think on this, because some people say, if God exists, why did he allow it to happen?
Yes, I did go through that too. And that is, I think, the majority of my book, right? Like tasting dirt when you're disappointed with God and talking about.
Yeah, I don't want you to tell too much about the book because I want people to buy it.
That's all right. But yeah, and wrestling with those questions, right? Like if God is really good and if he really loves us, then why would he let this happen, right? Why does he let abuse happen? Why did Jesus stay away for extra days until Lazarus was dead before he, went to Mary and Martha? The age-old question, right? The problem of pain. If God is really loving and good, then why do bad things happen, right? And wrestling with that and sitting with that and bringing that into a conversation with God, as opposed to trying to answer those questions about him without him. Like that's hard, and it takes a long time, longer than we have in this podcast, unfortunately, to unpack. But yes, the wrestling with that is something that I think that all of us have to go through. It's part of our path towards spiritual maturity, is how do we answer that question? And there are a couple of other big questions too that have to be answered. And we have to answer those for ourselves, between us and God, not just what did this pastor tell us, or what does this talking head figure say, or what did our parents say, or how did they answer the question? We have to answer that question between us and God in order.
To summarize it, before we sort of embellish a bit more in the remaining time that we've got, how would you summarize it, you personally, as to why God allowed it to happen?
I summarize it in this way, that God is just as upset about those things as we are. And I see Jesus weeping with Mary and him not defending himself, right? Not standing up and saying like, I'm God and I have every right to do whatever I think is best. And you just don't understand. You're just not capable of understanding. And that's a piece of it. It is a piece, but it's not the whole thing. That as humans, right, we are not God by definition. But at the same time, there's also the free will piece that, you know what, let me summarize it this way. There's a story. One of my professors used to start a class with this story. Before the beginning of time, God the Father and God the Son and God the Holy Spirit were having a conversation. And God the Father said, I desire to create beings in our own image that would be able to receive our love and share our love. And the Son and the Holy Spirit, they agreed. They thought this is good. And as they were talking about what shape this would take and how this would look, the Holy Spirit chimed in and said, well, since we're not creating more gods, they won't be perfect. So at some point, they will choose to reject our love, and they will not show our love to each other. And what will we do when that happens? And Jesus said, I'll go, and I will redeem them, and I will be what they cannot be. And in that really short and totally extra biblical story, right? Like, not in the Bible, but I don't think it contradicts the Bible, right?
No.
This picture of God choosing not only to make us knowing that we would mess things up and we would hurt each other, but then choosing to come for us and to be with us and to hurt with us and to find a way to make it okay that it rather than never creating us in the first place, he chose to find a way to give us life and give us the experience of his love and to redeem all of the ways that we would choose to mess it up. And in that, I find peace and I find comfort. And there are still days when I'm like, seriously, God? Like, really? There are still those days. But like I said, that I have those conversations with him now instead of without him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would it be unfair for me to say that actually, and I think you summed up beautifully as well, saying, well, there's a piece of this and there's a piece of that. It's all part of the jigsaw as to why God allowed it to happen. And I think that horrendous time when you finally worked out that it was abuse as well.
Yeah.
And the fact that the person was over the age of 16 as well. It wasn't what you wanted to have in the first place. That's another part of the abuse.
Yeah.
There's more caveats to it. Basically, I think what I'm trying to say is part of the reason why God allowed it to happen was because you had a choice and you either could go your own way, or which that might have made you okay, but it also might have made you even worse. And for the rest of your life, it was nagging at you all the time and you'd have had one troubled relationship after another. Maybe you didn't. Who knows? That's one way. Or the other way, a bit like a sliding doors moment, really.
Yeah.
It's a fact that the other sliding door that you went through is, right, okay, despite everything, I'm going to trust you, God. And God is saying, right, now, because of the horrendous thing that I didn't want to happen to you, we can now use that so that you can help all the other people that unfortunately are going to go through it as well.
Yeah.
And that's part of your counseling.
Yeah, that's part of how he redeems the pain. And I don't believe that God puts us through terrible things so that then we can help other people with the terrible things they go through. I don't believe that. I believe that Satan comes after us with terrible things, right? And sometimes it's through other people, and sometimes that's through our own poor decisions.
Yeah.
But that Satan comes after us with terrible things. But there is nothing that Satan can do to hurt us that is so bad that God can't take it and flip it on its head and make it good. And so I don't believe that God does those things to us, puts us through those things, even allows those things to happen because he wants some sort of character development or wants to use it later. But I think that when it does happen, that there isn't anything that God is not big enough and strong enough and wise enough and loving enough to take and turn it around and make it better than if it had not happened. Yeah. Yes.
Great answer. That's an embroidered answer.
Yes.
It's a fantastically embroidered answer. What a brooch.
We're getting so much embroidery done today.
Oh, I tell you, it is the embroidery of embroideries. Just to summarize the whole thing that's happened here, then, you've already given us one spoiler alert. How many people from 20 years ago, let's say, when this happened, have come to you and asked, roundabout way, forgiveness, which has made even more closure?
Oh,
Let's start
zero.
off with your parents.
Zero.
Really?
Yes. They haven't read my book. They'll probably never listen to this podcast. We don't have a lot of conversation. Now, to be fair, my dad, he's technically my stepdad, but I really only grew up with him. And so my dad did apologize to me kind of in general 2 years or so ago for not understanding my mental health needs at the time. He did recognize that when I was a teenager, and he would say things like, he was like, I don't understand why you expect to be happy all the time. Nobody's happy all the time. And I would think to myself, I don't want to be happy all the time. That's not what I expect. I want to not want to die all the time. But I could never say that out loud. But my dad did apologize to me as his understanding of mental health has grown. And so there was that apology. Outside of that, though, no, there hasn't been.
And the abuser, what happened to that person?
I don't know. I don't have any contact with her, and I haven't since once my parents found out. Now, they did end that relationship and cut all contact and, cut all ties, and I never saw her again, and I am grateful for that.
A relation by any chance?
No, not related to me. And that also did make things easier, right? Because there's no awkward holidays or, anything like that, for sure. Yeah. So I am grateful for that. But no, I haven't had any contact with her since then. I have in my path of forgiveness, which we could do a whole nother podcast, right? Just on forgiveness. and what that is and how that actually happens and all the myths around forgiveness inside of the church that make it harder than it has to be. But anyway.
Would you be up for that if we could do a podcast later on? Not
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
today.
Yeah, I would be up
Would
for
that be all right?
Yeah. But all that to say, in my journey of forgiveness, now I am able, I pray healing for her in whatever it is that she needs, right? Whatever it is that was hurting and broken inside of her that caused her to act out in the way that she did sexually with me. I pray healing for her. And I've come to a place where I think that when I get to heaven someday, if she's also in heaven, that I could be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a very famous evangelist from America who says, forgiveness doesn't make you right, it makes you free.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it does.
You'd agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yet another time she's right. I'll give her a tick again. It's something that my wife always says to me. Wow. Thank you. I will get my lawyers to talk to your lawyers if that's all right.
All right. All right.
In the next few weeks.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Martin. I really am honored to be joining you in this way.
Thank you, because I will make sure that's okay. We can do the forgiveness.
Yeah.
And in the remaining 2 minutes,
yes.
It leads into the very last question. Drum roll, please. Sara Hall, who is your Christian hero, please?
My Christian hero is Takashi Nagai. And I just learned about him just last year during the Easter season. He was a Catholic Christian in Japan, and he actually survived the bombing of Nagasaki. And his wife did not. And he was a doctor, and specifically, today we would call it a radiologist, but it was at the very beginning, right, of radiology and the science and the medicine of X-rays. And he died of exposure, like radiation exposure from the X-rays, not from the bomb. But his wife did die immediately in the attack. She was in the ground zero location. And he wrote a book called The Bells of Nagasaki, and just his own personal work and theology and his relationship with Jesus around forgiveness and hope and the understanding of what we were just talking about. Why does God let horrible things happen, right? For a Japanese Christian who had nothing to do with the politics of the day in the world, right? Whose family and community was horribly destroyed, and how he walked through and walked his spiritual community afterwards through the idea of forgiveness and hope and healing and where God is in the midst of all of this is so beautiful and so moving to me. He spent his last days here on the earth, what would have been his last days anyway, doing that work and having those conversations and being in that space with people who are suffering. I really admire that. So yeah, Takashi Nagai.
Wow. And the fact that he survived the bomb.
Yeah.
Do you know when he died?
I do not know the day or the year. The book was originally published in 1949.
Okay.
I'm looking for a bit that will tell me. He died on May the 1st of 1951. His story, the story of his life, is just fascinating.
Well, you're the first person to ever have chosen him. And that is a fantastic way to end just an incredible podcast. I said at the beginning, I didn't know where I was going to go. Let's go off piece sort of thing. As I seem to be saying this all the time now. I thank you so much for the way that you shared. I thank you so much for your honesty, your humility, and the fact that I could see the emotion in you. And hopefully that will come across as well to say, hey, there is hope here.
Yeah.
There is hope despite what you're going through on a personal level or on a massive corporate level called Nagasaki as well. There is hope, and it's a 5-letter word beginning with J ending in S.
Yes.
Middle letters E, S and U. I will look forward to contacting you through our various lawyers, as I say, so that we can get the one.
Yeah, I look forward to that too.
For forgiveness, and just keep going, because I think you are going to be, in years to come, an even more amazing therapist than you already are.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you for joining us today. It's been amazing. Thank you, Sarah. Cheers. God bless. And if you haven't already subscribed, and I know I keep saying this, please hit the subscription button. It really means a lot. Thank you very much indeed. Next time on Off Grid Christianity, well, it's our 150th episode.
So, for example, Sophie Neville, who's part of our Resolute Books, very graciously gave me a selection of her old school report, which had a fantastic paragraph in it about what she should do to become a better member of the school. And with her permission, I'm going to repurpose that. Isabella is going to find an old school report saying Isabella should do this. So I see it as a kind of recycling thing. Someone takes the time to be horrid to you, then fine. Using it takes the sting out of it.
Oh, fantastic.
Mm.
Andy?
Similar to Ruth, I'd say if I'm going to write anything that's vaguely theological, I will be careful how I write it, on the basis that it's going to be incredibly easy for somebody somewhere to pick holes in it, somebody somewhere to object. And they might be right. You know, I might write something, I might just kind of have a bad day and say, well, of course, there's 4 persons in the Trinity, isn't there, or something. And somebody might come along and go, I don't think your maths is quite right there. So I'm being open to what people might say. I mean, some people are ranty and incoherent, and I would just say, God bless you, from a distance and move on.
Very good.
If somebody is making more of a coherent point and I can understand what they're saying, then I might think about it. But in the end, it's not worth it. You know, you do a bit of due diligence and then you kind of move on from it, really.
So please join me as we discuss what it is like to be a Christian author and what that entails with 2 well-known Christian writers, Andy Chamberlain and Ruth Lee. And wow, did we have a laugh? Yes. Did we learn a lot? Yes. Till then, cheerio.